Welcome to the Bhagavad Gita Deep Analysis by Bhagavad.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into some truly profound and, timeless source material. What we have before us is a collection of specific texts, research notes, all really intensely focused on the very opening moments of the Bhagavad Gita.
That's right. All set against the backdrop of the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
And these sources, they offer a remarkably detailed lens, don't they?
They really do. A way to view the setting the field itself, the key players poised for conflict, and critically, the intense immediate crisis that unfolds for the central figure, Arjuna.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the most important nuggets of knowledge, the insights buried within these texts.
Exactly. And we want to present them in a way that's not just informative, but feels, positive, professional.
Almost like receiving wisdom from a trusted guide. A guru, perhaps.
Precisely. The aim is to give you a shortcut, really, to being genuinely well-informed about this foundational moment.
It's one of the world's most influential spiritual texts, after all.
No question. So we're stepping right up to the edge of war. Picture this. Two absolutely massive armies are assembled, facing each other.
The tension must have been palpable.
You can only imagine, the air thick with the anticipation of battle. But right there, in that space, something utterly unique, something unexpected is about to happen.
And that singular event revolves entirely around Arjuna, doesn't it?
It does. He's the epitome of a formidable warrior, renowned for his skill, his courage. He's standing ready.
Poised for the fighting to start.
But then he falters. He looks across that vast expanse of warriors, and he sees not just an enemy force.
He sees his own family.
His own family. Grandfathers, teachers he revered, uncles, cousins, brothers, friends, all arrayed on the opposing side, ready to fight him.
Suddenly, it's not just a military engagement anymore.
No. It transforms instantly into a deep, overwhelming ethical and spiritual crisis for him. A personal crisis.
And that crisis, that moment of profound personal collapse, the sources really emphasize this, don't they?
They do. It's not just a plot point. It's presented as the perfect stage, maybe even the necessary stage, upon which the incredible divine wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita is subsequently spoken.
Right. It's in this state of utter human desperation, this confusion, that the highest spiritual knowledge is imparted.
Exactly. So let's really unpack this moment, starting right at the absolute beginning, just as the sources present it.
Okay, where do we begin?
Well, the texts lead us immediately to the very first verse, and it originates with the blind king Dadarayda.
Ah, yes. He's physically removed from the battlefield, isn't he? Can't see what's happening.
Correct. So he turns to Sanjaya, and he asks him, essentially, what did my sons, the Kauravas, and the sons of Potko, the Pandavas, do after they assembled on the field of Kurukshetra?
And Sanjaya's role here is crucial from the get-go.
Absolutely vital. He's the one blessed with divine vision. He can witness everything, the events, the inner thoughts, even the conversation between Kala and Arjuna, and relate it all back to the sightless king.
So he's the eyes for Dithara, and really for us as well.
He is. And the very first term used to describe the battlefield in Dithara's question is incredibly loaded with meaning. He calls it Dharmakatra.
Dharmakatra. What do the sources say that means exactly?
They explain it as the holy place, or the field of Dharma, the field of righteousness, of duty. So right from the opening word, the texts signal that this isn't just any patch of land.
It's elevated. It has an immediate, inherent spiritual significance.
Precisely. The sources are quick to establish this isn't your typical historical war zone.
Not like the wars we usually read about, driven by the usual motives.
Right. They make a very clear distinction. They emphasize this conflict was fundamentally different from wars fueled purely by, say, greed for wealth and glory.
Or religious conflicts.
Or rooted in religious prejudice between different ideologies, yes.
Yeah.
Or even instigated by despotic political regimes just seeking power.
Those are common drivers, historically. But this was different.
Completely different, according to the sources. They are quite explicit. This was a fratricidal war.
A family feud, essentially.
Literally a family feud, yes.
Yeah.
But one born from fundamental human faults.
Ah, okay. What kind of faults are we talking about?
Well, the sources list things like an overwhelming greed for sovereignty, for power, a failure to uphold one's prescribed duty, or dharma, deep-seated envy.
Things we can all recognize, perhaps.
Oh, certainly. Also, excessive family attachment, which can cloud judgment. And perhaps most fundamentally, a false identification of the self, thinking I am this physical body, and getting caught up in its temporary relationships.
So it wasn't about clashing religious beliefs or simply grabbing territory.
No, these weren't differing spiritual paths clashing. These were human imperfections leading to conflict within a single family lineage. Those inherent flaws are presented as the underlying cause, the spark that ignited this specific war.
But there's something else that makes this battlefield unique, isn't there? Something beyond just the cause of the war.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The truly pivotal distinction, the element that makes Kurukshetra unique in spiritual history, the sources tell us, is why this specific conflict would be remembered for millennia.
It wasn't just another tragic battle lost to time.
Far from it. Kurukshetra would become the place that would uniquely record a profound lesson for the benefit of all future generations.
And that unparalleled lesson is the Bhagavad Gita itself.
Exactly. Specifically taught by Kurukshetra. And its purpose is explicitly stated in these sources.
Which is?
It's intended to help humanity collectively overcome its mundane shortcomings, those very human faults that led to this war in the first place, and consequently to become established in transcendence and attain self-realization.
Wow! So that's a huge claim for a battlefield.
It is. This overarching spiritual goal is what imbues Kurukshetra with its unique significance as a Dharma Kshetra, a field of righteous action and spiritual awakening. It makes it unlike any other battlefield.
Okay, so the scene is set. The armies are assembled on this uniquely significant field. Narration starts with Sanjaya reporting back to the Duraita, and the sources immediately shift our focus to Duryodhana.
Right. Sanjaya describes Duryodhana's initial actions. He goes over to his venerable mentor and teacher in warfare, Drodha.
After sizing up the opposition.
Yes, after Duryodhana has taken the time to survey the opposing forces, the Pandava army. He's making a strategic assessment.
And he seems quite keen to impress upon Drilka just how strong the Pandavas are.
He does. He starts naming many of the formidable figures arrayed against them. Satyaki, Virat, Drupada, Chaketu, Chekitana, Purjit, Kuntipoja, Shibya.
Quite a list.
Oh, yes. Yuhamanyu, Uttamoja, Abhimanyu, the valiant son of Subhadra and the sons of Draupadi. He acknowledges their strength, their formidable presence. He wants Dro to understand the gravity of the opposition they face.
But then, after listing all the enemy's strengths, he quickly pivots, doesn't he?
He does. It's almost like he's reassuring himself, or maybe trying to project confidence to his teacher. He then meticulously details the commanders on his side.
Describing them as experts, ready for anything.
Exactly. Armed with various weapons, and crucially declaring them ready to die for him, he lists the stalwarts like Bhuma, Karan, Kappa, Ashvatuma, Vikard, Bujirava, Yadratha. He sees them as absolutely dedicated, formidable.
But the sources highlight a really specific and crucial strategic error that Duryodhana makes right here in this assessment, verse 10, I believe.
Yes, this is specifically called out. The sources literally label it a classic military blunder.
What is the blunder exactly?
Well, despite acknowledging the mighty warriors and the strong formation of the Pandava army, which he notes is expertly protected by Bhima, he somehow concludes their strength is insufficient.
Insufficient compared to his own.
Compared to his own forces, yes, which he describes as unlimited and particularly well protected by the great-grandsire Bhuma. He fundamentally underestimates his adversaries.
And this underestimation, the sources link it back to those human flaws we talked about.
Directly. His judgment is described as being blinded. Blinded specifically by his greed for the kingdom, his overwhelming desire for power and wealth.
Or his hatred.
Or by his long-standing hatred for his cousins, the Pandavas, exactly.
Yeah.
And the commentary within the sources states this very plainly. It's quite a profound insight, really.
What does it say?
Hate and greed are certainly poor allies of judgment, usually resulting in wrong decisions and the senseless loss of life.
Wow. That really hits home. Our internal state, negative emotions, desires, directly corrupts our ability to see reality clearly.
It certainly seems so. It affects our ability to make sound decisions, even strategic ones, with immense consequences. It's a timeless truth, isn't it? How our inner landscape shapes our external actions and outcomes.
It really is.
And the sources also touch upon another important concept here, something they term the theology of convenience.
Theology of convenience, what's that about?
They explain how Duryodhana's side likely adopted a comforting, though ultimately superficial, belief that, God is on our side.
Ah, a sentiment we've heard echoed through countless conflicts across history, often tragically justifying immense suffering.
Exactly. The sources critique this. They note how frequently both sides in conflicts claim divine sanction for their actions, using the name of God to justify violence and suffering.
So it's a contrast to the actual spiritual purpose of Kurukshetra.
A stark contrast. Unlike the genuine spiritual purpose of Kurukshetra as the field for the Bhagavad Gita's profound wisdom, this theology of convenience is presented as superficial, self-serving justification for aggression and conflict. It's a reminder, really, that just invoking the divine doesn't automatically make an action righteous.
Especially when driven by greed and hate.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So Duryodhana completes his assessment, expresses this flawed confidence, and then he issues a specific command to his forces.
Right, in verse 11. What does he tell them?
He instructs his commanders to strategically support and protect Bhima from all sides. He clearly recognizes Bhima's central importance and perhaps vulnerability as the lead general.
Okay, so assessments made, instructions given, and then the signal for war finally erupts.
The atmosphere, already electric, just explodes with sound. First, the venerable Bhima, the grandsire, described as fearless as a lion.
What does he do?
He lets out a tremendous roar and blows his conch shell very loudly. The sources indicate this was done specifically to encourage Duryodhana.
To boost morale.
Exactly, to inject a sense of euphoria, of resolve into his army at this critical moment. A dramatic, powerful beginning intended to inspire.
The rest of the army follows.
Immediately. Verse 13 says, the sound is amplified across the entire Kuru army. All their various war instruments, conches, kettle drums, bugles, trumpets, drums, horns, they all sound simultaneously.
Creating a huge wall of sound.
A thunderous, tumultuous, and undoubtedly intimidating noise. An attempt at sonic dominance, you could say.
But then the sound shifts. The poke of a side responds.
Yes, and the sources describe their response as fundamentally different. In verse 14, we hear from Shrukat, notably identified here as the husband of the goddess of wealth, pointing to his supreme position.
And Arjuna.
And Arjuna, yes. They blow their conchis, and they do so from their wonderful chariot. The key distinction made here is that these are described as divine conches.
Divine conches, so the contrast is significant. The Kuru sound is loud, chaotic, human fanfare.
Right. While the Pandava sound originates from key divine or divinely connected figures using divine instruments, it symbolizes a different kind of power.
And the sources get very specific about these conches.
They do, taking time in verses 15 through 18 to name them and who blew them. Kant blew his conch, named Panikajanya.
And Arjuna,
referred to as Sananjaya, the winner of wealth, blew his, named Devadatta. Bhima, known for his great feats, blew Pontra, described as the very large, powerful conch.
And the other main Pandava leaders joined in too?
Yes. King Yudhishthira, the epitome of righteousness, blew his conch, Ananta Vijaya, meaning unending victory.
Nice name.
Isn't it? Nakula blew Sugo, sweet sounding, and Sahadeva blew Manchapapaka, jewel blossom.
And others as well.
Many others listed. The king of Kesha, the expert chariot warrior Sukech, Diadumna, who was their commander-in-chief, King Viraya, Satyaki described as invincible, King Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and Abhimanyu, the mighty son of Subodra. It was a combined symphony of sound from the Pechava ranks.
And the immediate impact of this combined Panchava sound, it's described as profound, isn't it? Psychological. Verse 19.
It's striking. The sources state that this tumultuous sound arising from the Pechava side didn't just echo across the field. It shatters the hearts of Tatara's sons.
Shatters their hearts. Wow.
It indicates that despite Duryodhana's outward confidence and his strategic assessment, this powerful, unified sound from the Pandavas, likely carrying a different energetic quality due to Kal and the divine instruments, had a deep, unsettling psychological effect on the Kauravas.
Perhaps hinting at the divine favor or the sheer resolve they faced.
That seems to be the implication. So the armies are fully assembled, the opening sounds of war have been exchanged, and it's at this precise moment, just as the conflict is about to become physically violent,
that Arjuna makes his pivotal move. He addresses Kauda.
Yes. Verse 20. Arjuna, also referred to here as Kapidvaja, his chariot banner has Hanuman on it.
The mighty devotee.
Right. He surveys the Kauravas. He takes up his formidable bow, the Gatava, known for its immense power, divine origin, and he speaks to Shruka.
And Kata is addressed here as Hokesha.
Hokesha, yes, meaning master of the senses, which is significant because Arjuna himself is about to experience a profound disturbance of his own senses and mind.
So he's fully armed, ready for battle, but he pauses. He speaks to Kandina, his charioteer, and his request is very specific.
It is. In verses 21 through 23, Arjuna makes a direct appeal. He says, "Oh, Asyuta,"
Asyuta,
meaning the infallible one. He says, "Oh, Asyuta, place my chariot between both armies." The Sanskrit is quite direct. Sinayor upayor madir asapaya mishuta.
Between both armies. Why right in the middle? What's his stated reason for this, well, unusual request?
The sources explain his stated purpose clearly. He says he wants this position so that I may look upon the soldiers that I must do battle with.
Okay.
The Sanskrit is yavar etan dirikahan yadukamanavastitan, meaning, as long as I may look upon those who are standing prepared for battle. He elaborates, to see with whom I have to fight in this undertaking of war.
So strategically, he wants a clear view, to size up the opposition before engaging.
That seems to be the surface reason. And he further refines his intention in verse 23. He says he specifically wants to see all those warriors that are dear to Duryodhana, the wicked son of Dattara, assembled here for this battle.
Focusing on the key players on the other side.
Exactly. Not just anonymous soldiers. The sources frame this request as a seemingly rational part of Arjuna's pre-war preparations, allowing him a final close observation before the fighting starts.
And coat up alleges, verses 24 and 25.
Yes, Sanjaya narrates that Suri, referred to here as Parthasarathi, the charioteer of Partha, another name for Arjuna.
Partha, son of Bhutha.
Right. Kudin draws the magnificent chariot right into the space between the two vast armies.
Into the most vulnerable spot, really. Exposed.
Exactly. Placing it specifically in front of key figures like Bhima, Droda, and all the world's leaders assembled there. And Kotna's instruction to Arjuna at this moment is simple, almost understated given what's about to happen.
What does he say?
O Partha, behold the Kaurava dynasty assembled here.
And this is the moment. From the central elevated vantage point, everything changes for Arjuna.
This is the absolute pivot point of the entire narrative. Upon following Kunta's instruction, beholding the assembled armies from this unique position, Arjuna's perception is just flooded with a horrifying realization.
He sees all his relatives on both sides.
All his relatives. It's not just faceless opponents anymore. It's the entire network of his life.
Family, mentors, friends.
The sources explicitly list the relationships he sees. Fatherly elders, respected grandfathers, teachers who instructed him, maternal uncles, beloved brothers, cousins, really sons, grandsons, fathers-in-law, close friends.
Seeing all those dear faces, ready for combat, ready to kill him or be killed by him?
It fills him with immediate, profound distress. The description is vivid. He becomes shocked by the reality. He fell into a state of bewilderment. He's instantly overcome with pity. The word uses kapai and becomes grief-stricken, biadan.
This is the sudden, crushing onset of his crisis. Moral, emotional.
Everything. And this overwhelming internal conflict, it doesn't stay internal for long, does it?
No, it quickly manifests externally, physically affects him.
Yes, in verses 28 through 30, Arjuna describes the physical symptoms of his despair directly to Kent. He feels his limbs giving way.
Strength draining.
Strength just draining from his body. His mouth becomes parched. His body trembles uncontrollably. His hair stands on end.
Goosebumps, but from horror.
Yes. He feels his skin burning, almost feverish. And most strikingly for a warrior of his stature, his mighty Gachva bow.
His most trusted weapon.
It just slips from his grasp. He physically cannot hold on to it.
He's physically collapsing under the psychological and ethical weight.
Absolutely. And mentally. He declares his mind is utterly bewildered, can't think clearly. He says he sees evil omens, interpreting everything around him negatively.
I can't keep his composure.
States it flatly. Nasaknami avasatam. I cannot keep my composure. This intense physical and mental breakdown just underscores the sheer intensity, the depth of his internal conflict.
It's not just hesitation. It's a total systemic shock.
It is. The warrior's identity, his purpose, it's shattering under the pressure of this perceived ethical predicament.
So Arjuna is experiencing this devastating physical and mental collapse. But his reaction isn't purely emotional, is it? He starts articulating a deep ethical and spiritual conflict, arguing against fighting.
Precisely. In verses 31 through 36, he voices this fundamental moral revulsion to Gedna. He looks at the situation and states unequivocally, I see no benefit in slaying my kinsmen in this battle. The thought itself produces only misfortune, he feels.
And he immediately rejects the traditional rewards of war, like victory or a kingdom.
Yes, a very clear rejection of material gains. He explicitly says he desires neither victory nor happiness by attaining a great kingdom, not even the pleasures of sovereignty, if they come at the horrific cost of killing his own relatives.
He questions the whole point.
The entire purpose of life, of worldly pleasures, of ruling a kingdom. What's the point, he asks, if the very people for whom these things are typically desired His teachers, elders, sons, relatives must be sacrificed. Who would he even share the enjoyment with?
He'd rather lose than win under these terms.
He goes to an extreme. He states his preference. He would rather be slain unarmed and unresisting by the Kauravas on the battlefield than raise his weapon and kill his own family members. It shows the depth of his conviction right then.
And he clearly sees this potential act fighting his kin as a grievous sin.
He does. He anticipates great misfortune resulting from it. He identifies it as great sin. He specifically recognizes the profound fault in betraying one's friends, and even more severely, the offense of murdering one's kinsmen. His moral compass, as he understands it then, is just screaming that this war is fundamentally wrong because of who the combatants are.
Now, this is where his dilemma really expands, isn't it? Beyond personal grief, immediate ethics. He elevates his concern to broader spiritual societal consequences, fearing the destruction of Dharma itself.
This section, verses 37 through 43, is absolutely crucial for understanding the depth of Arjuna's thinking here and the context the sources provide. Arjuna contrasts his own dawning sense of profound wrongness with the Kauravas,
who he sees as greed-blinded.
Yes, who he perceives see no fault in destroying their own family structure for the sake of a kingdom. They're driven by material desire, while he's suddenly confronted with these huge spiritual ramifications.
And his deepest concern isn't just the loss of individual lives, it's the unraveling of the very fabric of society and tradition.
Exactly. He fears the destruction of Sanatana, meaning eternal family traditions. The sources call this Kula Dharma. He sees the obliteration of these time-honored practices and values as an absolute catastrophe, with far-reaching consequences.
And he foresees a specific cascading chain reaction of negative outcomes from this destruction.
The sources detail this unraveling step by step as Arjuna articulates it. First, he sees the prevalence of unrighteousness, or adharma, when family traditions, family dharma, are destroyed.
And that leads to...
This rise of adharma, he argues, leads directly to the degradation or pollution of family women.
And what happens as a result of that?
The consequence he points to is the birth of undesirable offspring, known in Sanskrit as vada sakara.
Vada sakara, what does that term imply?
It refers to the disruption of the traditional social order, the mixing of progeny due to the breakdown of moral and religious principles within families. It implies confusion, a loss of clarity in lineage and duty.
And how does this unwanted progeny impact things, according to Arjuna's fear?
According to his view, presented in the sources, this vada sakara creates a dreadful condition, not just for the living family members, because of the chaos and lack of order,
but also for those who caused it.
Yes, and even for those who destroyed the traditions in the first place. Furthermore, he fears it leads to the fall of forefathers' previous generations.
How so?
Because the traditional ceremonial rituals, like offering libations of food and water, which were considered essential for their spiritual well-being in the afterlife, according to the prevailing beliefs, would be discontinued by this corrupted lineage. No one would perform them correctly.
So the consequences ripple forward to future generations and backward to past generations, a complete breakdown across time.
That's the fear. The sources describe Arjuna's dread that this would lead to the total annihilation of all traditions of family and society, resulting in wretched conditions for those who caused it, maybe even eternal residence in hell due to the immense sin incurred.
So his perspective is that this war isn't just killing people.
It's destroying the very foundation of moral and social order upon which their civilization rests, with dire spiritual repercussions for everyone involved, past, present, and future.
He sees the destruction of his family not just as a personal tragedy, but as a cosmic unraveling, a grave violation of eternal principles.
That's precisely the weight he feels. And in verses 44 and 45, Arjuna expresses deep self-reproach. He laments their collective great wickedness for even being willing to commit such a devastating act, killing relatives, destroying traditions.
Simply for greed.
Simply due to our greed to enjoy royal pleasures, as he puts it. He reiterates his earlier point, emphasizing he'd much prefer to be killed by the Kauravas while unarmed and unresisting than participate in such a sin.
And this leads to the definitive moment in verse 46. His despair culminates in a physical act of surrender.
Yes, having expressed the totality of his dilemma, the physical distress, mental bewilderment, ethical revulsion, fear for spiritual consequences, societal breakdown, Arjuna acts.
He puts down his bow.
He physically casts aside his Gachbara bow and arrows, the mighty warrior ready for battle moments before. He just sits down on the chariot.
In his internal state.
The sources describe it simply, his heart heavy with sorrow. He effectively ceases to be a warrior in that moment. He gives up.
He surrenders his duty as a warrior, overwhelmed by the ethical and spiritual weight as he sees it.
Exactly. It's not presented as simple cowardice by the sources. It's a profound crisis of identity, of purpose, a moment where his understanding of Dharma clashes violently with the reality before him, leading him to abandon the path of action.
And this moment of surrender, this apparent defeat, the sources highlight it's not an end, but a beginning. Even in his despair, Arjuna does something the sources call intelligent.
He does. Even in this state of total collapse, confusion, Arjuna intelligently turns to the only one he knows can possibly resolve his insurmountable dilemma.
He turns to Srikin.
Exactly. This act of turning to Kinsen in his moment of greatest need shows a fundamental recognition of Kinta's true nature, which the sources describe as the absolute truth, complete with all opulence and knowledge.
So he's not just crying out to his friend and charioteer. It's an intelligent appeal to the divine source.
It is. And the purpose of his appeal is explicit and specific. He is seeking infallible advice.
But that's beyond human error.
Advice free from human error, emotional bias, something to relieve his disturbed mind and senses. The sources note his inherent confidence that by seeking Kan's shelter, Kan's guidance, in this state of helplessness, all impediments to clear understanding would be removed. He knows only Kani can cut through his illusion.
And the language he uses when addressing Kan, it underscores this appeal to divinity, doesn't it? He uses various divine names.
This is a very significant detail the sources draw attention to. Arjuna uses several specific divine names for Kaninke, Achyuta, Kesha, Govinda, Madhusudana, Janardana, Madhava, Varintya.
And these names have specific meanings relevant to the situation.
Yes, the sources explain their meaning and significance, especially as they relate to Arjuna's predicament or Kanna's power to help.
Can we explore some of those? Like Kuchya.
Yeah, certainly. When Arjuna first addresses Kanna as Hukesha, master of the senses, it's highly relevant because Arjuna himself is experiencing a complete loss of control over his own senses and mind. He's overwhelmed.
So addressing kin like that acknowledges kin is free from that.
Exactly. It's an implicit acknowledgement that Kim's is free from the very bewilderment Arjuna is suffering, and thus can help him regain control. Then when he calls him Asyuta, the infallible one.
That seems crucial when you're totally confused.
Right. In this moment of extreme doubt, uncertainty, Arjuna needs advice that is absolutely dependable, free from any possibility of error, unlike his own confused judgment. So Asyuta, the infallible one, is the perfect name to use.
What about names related to overcoming obstacles? That seems relevant here too.
Absolutely. Using the name Kachava, killer of the key demon, signifies Kin's power to vanquish negative qualities that act like demons within us. Things like false greatness, dishonesty, greed, anger, envy.
The very faults that started this war and are causing Arjuna distress.
Precisely. And Madhusudana, killer of the Madhu demon, is another name associated with overcoming formidable obstacles or demonic influences. It's an implicit appeal for Kanatsa's power to remove the cause of his suffering.
And some names seem to directly relate to the specific fears Arjuna is voicing.
They do. He uses Govinda, often translated as one who pleases the senses, right when he's questioning the purpose of sensual pleasures derived from a kingdom gained through bloodshed. It's almost like he's asking the master of enjoyment, what's the point of enjoyment under these terrible terms?
And Janardana.
He calls him Janardana, maintainer of all living beings, when expressing his fears about the terrible consequences for all beings if society collapses due to the destruction of Dharma. He's appealing to Kanna's inherent role as the sustainer of the universe. Madhava, husband of the goddess of fortune, might be used when considering the sin related to material gain, the kingdom which caused this conflict.
And Varda, that sounds like a family name.
It is. Vartana means descendant of the Vita dynasty. Using this name can be seen, perhaps, as a way to remind Kanaya, who is a member of the same broad family lineage, of the paramount importance of family traditions, Kuladharma, which are so central to Arjuna's anguish and his perceived dilemma.
So, by using these specific names, Arjuna isn't just being polite or formal.
Not at all. He's demonstrating a deep, maybe intuitive understanding of Kanna's divine nature and capabilities. He's specifically invoking those aspects of the Kanna most relevant to his particular crisis.
Making a heartfelt, intelligent appeal for divine intervention and guidance.
In a situation he feels utterly incapable of resolving on his own, It's a complete surrender to a higher wisdom. And this sets the stage perfectly. Kanna's already there, intimately connected as his charioteer, Parthasarathi.
Providing physical presence and direction.
Right. And Arjuna's profound crisis, his breakdown, his intelligent, desperate appeal for infallible help. It creates the exact context necessary.
The perfect context for the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken.
Exactly. The sources describe this conversation between Kanna and Arjuna as the origin of the Bhagavad Gita, calling it the Yoga Shastra of divine knowledge.
And the sources are very clear. This isn't just a source of knowledge among many.
No, it is presented as the source. The sources state it is the greatest source of knowledge of the absolute truth itself.
Wow.
They emphasize that it surpasses all other branches of knowledge and contains profound wisdom that cannot be found anywhere else. It's presented as the ultimate instruction manual for navigating human existence. Uniquely comprehensive, authoritative, and universally relevant.
And its purpose, again,
explicitly stated, to enable humanity, caught in the cycle of suffering due to its inherent flaws, to overcome those very imperfections and attain self-realization. To realize our true spiritual identity beyond the temporary material body and its attachments. Arjuna's crisis, born of these universal human flaws, becomes the lesson for everyone.
Speaking of those flaws, the sources identify several fundamental human shortcomings inherent in our material condition that lead to conflict, suffering, confusion. And they're clearly exemplified by both Duryodhana and Arjuna in this opening scene.
They are laid bare, aren't they? You see Duryodhana driven by intense greed and desire for material gain, his overwhelming ambition for the kingdom.
And Arjuna acknowledges it in himself, too.
Yes, speaking of his own potential entanglement, his greed to enjoy royal pleasures if the war brought victory. We see Duryodhana's destructive hatred and prejudice towards the Pandavas.
Which blinds his judgment.
Explicitly stated by the sources, yes, leading to critical errors. And we see a general poor fund of knowledge leading to faulty conclusions.
Like Duryodhana's military blunder.
And Arjuna's initial overwhelming bewilderment regarding his duty and the consequences of the war. The sources also explicitly list false identification of the body as the self, as a root cause of this specific fratricidal war.
Believing I am this temporary body.
Exactly, and thinking its relationships are permanent, leading to attachment and aversion that fuel conflict.
And the very attachments and duties that cause Arjuna's despair are listed as drivers too.
Indeed. Family attachment, envy, which fueled Duryodhana, and the confusion around failure and duty are listed as core drivers of the conflict and the source of Arjuna's immense grief and confusion.
Even the divine names like Kafigifa point to overcoming negative qualities.
Right, associated with overcoming things like the desire for name and fame, dishonesty, anger, adherence to false teachings. These feel less like specific historical issues and more like universal human challenges, don't they?
They really do. They persist across time and culture.
And the core message highlighted is that the Bhagavad Gita, according to these sources, offers the direct means to understand and ultimately transcend these very flaws that cause us suffering and confusion in material existence.
How does it do that? What's the mechanism?
Primarily, it provides knowledge of the absolute truth. This supreme knowledge illuminates reality. It enables clear judgment and dispels the ignorance which is the root of many of these flaws.
The ignorance that leads us to identify with the temporary.
Exactly. To pursue fleeting material gains, to act from hate and greed. And it's also about turning to a higher power for guidance.
Seeking shelter.
Seeking shelter in the infallible master, Shutonka. That helps dispel the illusion, the Maya, that causes bewilderment and attachment. Arjuna's act of surrender and appeal is the perfect example, turning to the right source when faced with an insurmountable problem.
And the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal offered by the Gita's wisdom is self-realization or transcendence, moving beyond the limitations, attachments, and illusions of this flawed material existence.
And this understanding leads to a different concept of peace, doesn't it? Shanti. Different from what we usually think of.
That's a key distinction the sources emphasize. Most people define peace as simply the temporary absence of any major crisis in the external world. A break between conflicts.
The true peace, Chuntier, is different.
It's described as an internal experience, a stable state of consciousness, because the material world itself, by its very nature, is inherently a place of conflict.
The sources cite Vedic literature on this.
Yes, citing the principle. Divo jivasya jivana, one living being is food for another living being. There's a fundamental, unavoidable level of struggle and violence inherent in material existence itself.
So, lasting peace can't be achieved just by manipulating external circumstances.
Because they're always changing, always prone to break down in conflict. True peace, then, isn't about fixing the world outside.
It's about transforming the state within.
Precisely. It comes from internal transformation, from the transcendence offered by the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. Moving beyond the limiting false identities, attachments, and flaws that cause internal turmoil and external conflict. It's a peace independent of external chaos.
Now, if you're finding this deep dive into the opening wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita as fascinating and illuminating as we are,
and you feel inspired maybe to explore more of this profound knowledge,
we do have resources available to help you continue this journey.
You can delve deeper into these timeless teachings, find materials that expand on the concepts we've discussed today by visiting our online hub.
That's https://techdohub.com. It's a place where you can find more deep dives, articles, resources, really, to help you further understand and maybe even apply this ancient wisdom in your own life.
Again, that's https://techdohub.com.
So just to recap where we are, we've seen Arjuna, the great warrior, brought to his knees, not by an enemy's weapon.
No, but by the sheer crushing weight of his situation. The profound ethical and spiritual questions it raises within him, his emotional, ethical, spiritual collapse on the battlefield is complete.
Yes, and the sources highlight that his surrender in that moment, casting aside his bow, giving up his duty, isn't presented as the final outcome.
Not at all. It's the crucial, necessary catalyst.
It's that moment of ultimate human crisis, bewilderment, and importantly, genuine seeking that creates the necessary
space for divine wisdom to enter. Exactly. It's precisely at this point, when a soul is in such deep despair, feeling utterly incapable of resolving its predicament through material means,
and intelligently turns to the absolute truth for guidance,
that the divine discourse of the Bhagavad Gita begins. It's a lesson offered not just to Arjuna in his specific crisis, but presented as a profound, timeless instruction for all humanity, for all future generations wrestling with similar doubts and dilemmas.
It really makes you think. Arjuna faced his toughest battle not just against the opposing army on the field of Kurukshetra, but right there within himself, wrestling with duty, attachment, the consequences of action. So as you navigate the battlefields of your own life, and we all have them, right, those difficult choices, the internal conflicts between what you feel and what you believe is right, the moments of doubt about your path, perhaps consider this thought. Are you fighting the right battles? And are you truly clear deep down on what you're fundamentally fighting for? Or maybe what you're fighting against within yourself?
That's a powerful question to reflect on, and to delve deeper into this profound wisdom, to find resources that can help you explore these questions and perhaps navigate your own dilemmas with greater clarity.
Remember to visit our online hub.
That's https://techdohub.com.
Come find more information and continue your journey of understanding these timeless teachings.
Again, that URL is https://techdohub.com.
Thank you for listening to the TechEduHub.com online podcast.